वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोतं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि।
Namaste. Welcome to KYG or Kaivalya Yoga Gurukulam. I'm in the premises of a very old temple, a very tiny but very powerful portal of Shiva. This temple is called the KailasanathaSwamy. The lingam has 16 faces embedded on it. But as you can see, I'm sitting in the entrance to the temple, which is right now in ruins, and this temple needs so much more help. But more of this in a separate video. In this class, I would like to take you to the next sutra of Patanjali, and that is Sutra 10. Which talks about yet another vritti, and that vritti is sleep. The sutra goes like this: abhāva-pratyaya-ālambanā-vṛttih-nidrā. There are words abhāva, pratyaya, âlambanā, vritti, nidrā. Nidrā is sleep. Vritti-nidrā means this vritti that we call sleep. So the first thing that we want to establish here is, how is sleep a vritti? By now we should be familiar with the term vritti, which means modifications, impressions, thoughts that come from the senses and so on. But in sleep there is no thought. There are no impressions being formed. And therefore, how can sleep be a vritti? Before we proceed further, let us be clear in this contextual definition of sleep in this particular context. Sleep is deep sleep. We are not talking about sleep which has dream in it. You could be sleeping and yet dreaming, which is technically considered sleep. But that is where the chitta is being bombarded with impressions from the memories, and we'll talk about memory separately in another video, because that's a separate vritti. But when Patanjali talks about sleep, they are talking of deep sleep. So here he is referring to deep sleep, right? And so the question naturally comes that in deep sleep, where are vrittis happening? How could Patanjali define sleep as a vritti? Why do we think that? It's because even the I doesn't exist. I am so fast asleep, I have no mind, no senses, no impressions coming in. How can that be a vritti? So the definition explains that. The absence of impressions is being recorded in the chitta. Sleep is an absence of experiences. Sleep is the absence of modification. You are aware of the absence of modification. That awareness is being recorded. So, going back to the definition, abhāva-pratyaya, abhāva. Pratyaya means pratyaksha, whatever we are seeing, whatever impressions are coming in, thoughts and all of that, that is abhāva, absent. Abhāva means absence, absence of pratyaya, absence of impressions, absence of thought. When the chitta is relying on the absence, drawing from the absence of these impressions, âlambanā, it's resting on the idea that there is no impressions being formed, then that vritti is called nidrā. Again, an analogy always explains this much better, and I am going to draw this from the analogy Swami Nikhilananda of the Chinmaya mission used. I like that. I am not going to modify that, it is exactly as I heard. So he says, think of a tape recorder that is recording audio. So I am speaking into the tape recorder, and therefore as I am speaking, my sound waves are recorded in the tape recorder. And then in between my talk, I pause. And when I pause, there is silence. And then I speak again. Then we stop the recording. So we started the recording, I was talking, there was a pause in between, and then I started talking again, and then we stopped recording, right? So what is recorded here? When I paused and when there was silence, was that silence also recorded? The obvious answer is yes, of course. So the tape records sounds, it also records the silence. In other words, it is recording the absence of sound. In the same manner, in our chitta, we record impressions that come through the senses, and when these impressions stop coming in, such as in deep sleep, that absence of that is also recorded. Which is why when we get up in the morning, we say, I did not know what hit me, I slept so well. I had no recollection, and I closed my eyes and that's it, all. I didn't have any recollection of what happened, who were all in the room. I was out for the count, we say that, right? And then I opened my eyes and lo and behold, everything came back. So that moment, or that, it could be few minutes, it could be few hours, of complete absence of vrittis is recorded in the chitta, and that is why you and I are able to recall that and say, wait a minute, that is what it was, the absence of vritti, and therefore sleep is a vritti. So that is established. Now Vyasa takes us and gives us a little more depth into the sleep. He says there are 3 types of sleep. We need to understand this because this will lead us to the next part of this learning about sleep, as to how can this vritti liberate us or bind us, right? Every vritti, as Patanjali explained, was klishta or aklishta. It can hurt you, it can harm us, it can bind us, or it can liberate us. We will come to that in a bit. But to understand that, we have to first come to, are there different kinds of sleep, this deep sleep we are talking about. So Vyasa says there is one sleep called the sukham sleep, happy sleep, where you get up in the morning very refreshed and you say, I had such a wonderful sleep, I am fully refreshed. Sukham, Vyasa says, you get up feeling very happy. So scholars define that as Satwik sleep. Satwik sleep is when we sleep really sound sleep. The body is fully refreshed and rested. How do we know that? When we get up, we feel it. We feel fresh, the body is fresh, and we are ready to go and jump into our daily tasks again. So that is one kind of sleep, Satwik sleep. Then Vyasa talks about the sleep that gives dukkha or unhappiness. How do we know that? Because we are fast asleep, we don't know. When we get up, Vyasa says, when you get up and you don't feel rested, you don't feel fresh. You were not aware of this when you were sleeping. Perhaps you were tossing and turning. We have all had these experiences, right? So we were perhaps tossing and turning and moaning. I don't know what it was. But then when I get up in the morning, I'm not feeling rested. I just want to just crash or just laze around a little bit. It's a very different experience from the sound sleep. So Vyasa calls this the sleep that gives unhappiness. Scholars called that kind of sleep as Rajasic sleep. There is some level of activity deep in the chitta that is happening, which we are not aware of, which is causing that disturbance, and therefore in that sleep, when we get up, we don't feel so rested. We have all been there, right? All right. So these are the two ones. What could be the third one? Vyasa calls that the mudha sleep. The sleep where you are literally knocked out. What is the example of that? Isn't that same like the sound sleep? No, this is different. What does that mean? It means, as an example, couple of examples. One could be somebody is drunk, taken so much alcohol that he is knocked out. When you get up after that kind of alcohol, for example, and get up in the morning, what happens? There is hangover. The head is aching, the body is aching, there is acidity in the stomach, I guess. One gets up feeling thirsty. All of that is a miserable condition, as opposed to being just restless and saying I didn't rest well. Mudha state is that. So that is even below the dukkham. It's not about unhappiness, it is truly damaging to the body. So Vyasa describes these three categories. Scholars call this the Satwik sleep, the sound sleep, the Rajasic sleep, the disturbed kind of sleep, and the Tamasic sleep where there is tamas, complete tamas, it's taken over. So now in sleep we have touched upon these gunas as well. Though predominantly tamas or inertia is the predominant quality in deep sleep, because you are still, you are not moving, you are not going anywhere, right? So that is a predominant quality, but there is an influence of sattva in the first type when you have a sound sleep, good quality sleep, as Vyasa calls it sukham. In that same tamas, you have an influence of rajas, where there is tossing and turning and you get up feeling not so rested. And then there is pure tamas, where because of the influence of external factors like somebody hit you on the head, or you have addiction or alcohol or drug or whatever it is, medication, that put you in such a deep sleep that you get up in the morning and you are feeling drugged, you are not feeling yourself. So that is pure tamas. So even in sleep you have these three gunas influencing. So now we come to the last part of this. How can sleep be binding or liberating? I think the answer is pretty clear now that we understood the gunas. When we have a sound sleep, that vritti, because sleep is a vritti, that kind of vritti where the sleep is very sound, when you get up feeling fresh, the body is well rested, that vritti is liberating. That vritti is harmless. On the other hand, I'll just talk of two extremes, and everything else that we experience falls in between those two extremes, right? And the other extreme where it is harmful is if I drink every night and get drunk so much that I don't know when I have fallen asleep, and I get up, there is a severe hangover, a headache and all of that, a miserable feeling in the body and all of that, sluggish liver and all of that fun stuff. So that is harmful. The sleep is the same. In both cases, we are apparently unconscious of what's going on in the external world. There are no impressions in both cases. There are no thoughts, there is no I feeling, there is no the mind, none of that. But even though apparently both could be lying on the same bed or similar beds, and still one is having a sound sleep, the other one is having a very harmful sleep. So the vritti, nidrâ, can be benign, aklishta, or can be binding and harmful, klishta. This is what Patanjali teaches us in this verse. Abhāva-pratyaya-ālambanā-vṛttih-nidrā. So examine the quality of your sleep and see for yourself, more often than not, are you having a sound sleep, or are you having a disturbed sleep, or Are you caught up in some kind of addiction where without that you cannot sleep? I will leave you with a very simple practical tip that has helped me. For most of the time, most of the days, there are of course exceptions, so I cannot say all the time. Most of the time, I try and give at least 4 to 5 hours gap between my last meal and the time I go to bed. So that's number one. To me, that really made a big difference. Coming from an India background, I guess it's more about cultural background. I was raised to, as from childhood itself, I was raised to eating after 8 o'clock at night. And then by 10 o'clock, we would go to sleep. So 8:30 we would have our dinner, and then by 10:30 we would go to sleep as a child, because we had to get up in the morning for school and things like that. But as we age, I noticed that my quality of sleep was slowly going down, and therefore it reflected on my ability to meditate in the morning. And I could feel that there was a sense of imbalance. So try and see if you can incorporate that. The more you give gap between your supper and your sleep, the more your quality of sleep improves. That's number one. Number two is avoid all kinds of sweets, and especially sugar, in the night. One odd time, once a month or once in 2-3 months, you attended a festival or something. There are always exceptions to these things. But then, as a rule in general, those exceptions cannot become the rule. Those exceptions can't be so frequent, like every weekend, 2-3 days in a week and things like that. In general, try and avoid, your last meal should not have anything that is too sweet in nature. Try and avoid that. Your sleep will definitely be of a much better quality. Try and avoid nicotine, or try and avoid caffeine and any of those kind of drugs at least 4 to 5 hours before you go to bed. So if you're having tea or coffee in the afternoon, that tea or coffee in the afternoon should not go later than 4 or 4:30 or 5, assuming you go to bed by 10. So these are some of the tips, and these are more or less common sense tips. But know that when Patanjali talks about it, and when we discuss this in terms of yoga, it is not just for general health. We are talking in terms of vrittis, so as to find that ultimate state of nirodha. Because if these things don't fall in place, then the ultimate state only remains a concept, remains a conceptual reality, remains a hypothesis, remains a matter of belief. And that's why Shiva, the state of Shiva, is now a matter of belief to most of us. That belief becomes dogmatic, becomes a religion, becomes an institution, and we miss the boat. So Patanjali awakens us and brings us back to the drawing board. Says, pay attention to this vritti, which is nidrâ. abhāva-pratyaya-ālambanā-vṛttih-nidrā. As always, thank you so much for taking time to watch this video. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to teach. It is always a pleasure and a privilege to sit in the presence of these ancient temples where sages and saints lived and worshipped the highest principle. Until we meet again, stay blessed, stay inspired, and stay with me on this path of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Namaste.
Klīm Kaivalya